Good morning, TTM fam. Eric here for Sunday, October 12th, 7 a.m. Eastern Time. I'm excited for this episode, honestly, because this is one of the hardest things that I had to learn um, for myself primarily and for others. And I didn't realize how much weight that it carried overall, but um, it does. And this is about forgiveness. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting because let's be truthful, whatever happens you're probably not going to forget, especially if it was something that was traumatizing to you, whether it be physically or emotionally. Um, ultimately forgiveness is about freedom, and excuse me, the hardest person to forgive is often yourself. Um, you know this episode isn't about cliches but real lived experience, and in my case it was um, you know it, with forgiveness, it's more about accountability. And as you grow older, as you mature, and as you stop to really think about your actions and the consequences that come about because of your choices, um, you get to kind of sit back, and when that tends to happen, it's sorry. When that tends to happen, a lot of doors open up. You're not just walking through one; you're walking through multiple. And in my case, when it comes to uh, the forgiveness for me, which was a struggle with alcohol. I used to blame without knowing. I unconsciously used to use that to fuel my drinking because I wanted to bury it. I wanted to get rid of it. I said the more that I drink, the more that I can get rid of it. And that ultimately wasn't the case. So, when it came to forgiveness of forgiving others, because of how they treated me, because of my choices, and a lot of it was tough, and I had to really take a step back and put myself in their shoes and kind of see what they were seeing, um, and understand why. And for the most part, uh, more than the most part, I went through all of you know friends, family members, ex-girlfriends, really kind of just asking them questions. You know what I mean? Like, what was one of the hardest things, and to get those answers, and then hear their side of the story, and then at the end, me being able to say, "Damn, like I apologize for those actions, but I forgive you for that." And to me, that ultimately was able to lift the weight up off of me, because I was carrying it. And then, so it was easy for me to forgive others because of the choices that I had made. Um, and with that weight, you tend to, walk around with a lot of anger, a lot of resentment, and it impacts your life. A lot of regrets too. But at the end of the day, it impacts your life. So by doing stuff like that, like I was able to get some weight lifted off me. I felt better. I felt really good, but there was still more. Um, I was still having the physical toll, the mental toll. Um, and at that point in time, I wasn't, my spiritual side was zero, like, um, but in that sort of aspect, when I kind of probably, I want to say, like, probably early 30s. Yeah, I would say late 20s, early 30s is when I actually forgave myself, because I was the one that was putting the undue pressure on myself every day because of my actions. I would replay them in my head. I'd be like, I can't believe I did this. I can't believe I did that. Um, so when it comes down to it, um, carrying that additional weight was, um, that was serious at the end of the day. Um, Sorry, I have to answer that. That was serious. So, but when I forgave myself for um, putting that undue pressure on me, even more weight lifted off, and things started to become very clear. That's probably the time where I stopped stopped sweating about the small stuff. Um, Understanding that, having conversation with, hearing a conversation from my father, um, and just understanding that he comes from a different, you know, he grew up differently. So that's the only thing that he knows. Um, and I kind of took that and I brought it through to others whom I spoke with and spoke to, and be like, hey, I would be like, hey, listen, like, this is kind of how you've always been, right? And they're like, yeah, yeah. And it's like, all right, so with being able to understand that, I was able to let a lot of things go, and just kind of take things with a grain of salt, and not have it impact me. Me not carrying around that additional weight, so to speak, emotionally, because I now saw, you know, where they were coming from, and I didn't see that before. And again, that took me a significant amount of time to understand, and that was through a lot of trials and tribulations of being able to read people, um, you know, um, and actually understand like what I was seeing. Um, and I tell you, when I finally just when I was finally able to do that, I can't stress enough that, you know the breakthrough that you have. It's like the aha moment, right? Where it just like it finally clicks, and you're just like, this is the missing piece to the puzzle that I had been searching for. Um, and I was able to release, right? And being able, excuse me, being able to do that really opened up another door for me. It wasn't necessarily about reconciliation, um, because I did apologize for all my wrongdoings, to those that I had cared for. I mean, those that I cared for and those that I did previously cared for, because I know how much that impacted them. But I also wanted them to, I was doing it more for myself in the sense of it, because I didn't want to be that guy that like did things and didn't hold himself accountable. So I went back and I made calls and, got a lot of like, what the hell are you doing? Like, lose the number type stuff. But, when I sat there and my opening line was, hey, there's something important that I need to tell you, and, um, and that I want to tell you. And then after that, I'm going to let you go, about your life. They listened, um, and they accepted it. And that they didn't have to. um, I guess I was very fortunate in that sort of respect that that was a part of my healing journey to hear from those people which I burned bridges with, um, or burned bridges to, still be able to make a call and hold myself accountable and have them say, you know what, I appreciate that, thank you. And then that was it. And they moved on with their life, and I moved on with mine. You know, um, and that to me was an essential part of the way that I was able to heal. Um, Again, forgiving yourself is the hardest, because you are your biggest critic. You are the hardest one in your day to day. Constantly questioning yourself, or why did I do this? Why did I do that? Um, like what you did in past relationships, what regrets did you have in past relationships, parenting missteps, they all kind of come into play. but at the end of the day, you have to give yourself some grace. You know, you have to learn from, you know, from your mistakes. And you know, I look at mistakes as learning lessons, and it's stuff that you may have done before, but you don't want to continue to do because it impacts you negatively. So always be, you know, the one thing is being self-aware and really understanding like what you do, what you say has more of an impact than you know, and you know, really kind of thinking things through and not going in and not necessarily shooting from the hip will allow you to be better because you're like, is this is this how it's supposed to go? Okay, you know, taking time, you know, giving that space for yourself, and giving yourself that grace. Because in the end, by having self forgiveness, it does open up growth and it opens up presence. Um, and in your whether it's whether it's a new relationship or um, you know, an old relationship that um, you know, coming into after a certain period of time, maybe. But you know, again, give yourself that give yourself that give yourself that time, and don't be so hard on yourself, especially about everything that goes on, because what may seem gargantuan at the time, um, you know, at the end of it, you know, in a few days, or you know, a few days, excuse me, a few weeks, it's not going to matter because you've already moved on. So now I want to kind of tie in the spiritual side, right? And the one thing that I'm learning spiritually is to um, it creates more framework for giving myself that grace. Um, so you choose to do what you want with it, you know, and like I've been, you know, I've been going to church now for the past 5 weeks. I guess 5 weeks. Still confused as hell. Not gonna lie. But I'm sticking to it. They do offer different classes, so I can learn more about what they are about and what their main focus is. I know they're full surrender. Um, you know, put everything in in God's hands, and I'm still navigating that. Um, but I'm eager. I'm open to learn. So you know, more to come on that separately. But you know, um, you know, when you do forgive yourself, it creates kind of a spiritual principle, not just in human effort but divine strength. So that's something I hope to get towards, um, and to be able to do that. And I think one of the things where, excuse me, as a man, um, you know, and how we're kind of taught to do things, um, is we handle it ourselves. So I think with me and trying to surrender to higher power is difficult because I've always handled difficult things. So that's what I'm hoping with, you know, with my spirit, with my new spiritual path, um, that I can fully surrender and um, you know, leave it to a higher power. But until then, I'm still in the driver's seat, you know, and but I'm open, you know, I'm not closed-minded. Um, so, I mean, I do think that's important, but um, you know, if you haven't tried the spiritual path, I highly recommend it. You know, go to your local church, you know, whether it's Catholic, Christian, Baptist, Protestant, um, doesn't matter. As long as you're going there, you know, I do feel a sense of purpose being there. Um, like I said, it's only been about 5 weeks, But every time I leave there, I'll be going today, going to 11 o'clock mass. It's kind of like I wake up, I go to the gym, I come home, shower, boom, out the door. Um, I've been bringing my daughter to church, and that's been fun. My girlfriend, she's been by my side through every event, and she's bringing her daughter. She brought her daughter to one so far. Didn't go with us this past week, but you know, baby steps. So, but fortunately, like for me and my daughter enjoys it. They get a youth room, so they learn a little bit. They have some fun, some snacks. So um, it's great. But fortunately, sidetracked a little bit. But I am going to try to do more, just kind of updates on that separately. But I'm sure, knowing the way that I do things, is I'll tie it into this and and throw it in there, so you'll get updates. Um, but the biggest thing is getting back to the original title of forgiveness. It's huge because we're never going to forget. Um, some people use that as fuel, some people don't. Some people look at it as a trigger. Some people um, overall are just you know phew, they don't believe in it. But I tell you, speaking from experience, somebody who finally said, "I forgive you," and then I said, "I forgive myself." Um, that's powerful, and I urge you to do that for yourself because it will clear. I truly believe it will give you a lot of clarity. It will release a lot of weight that you're carrying around and will allow you to move forward in a better fashion because you won't have that that quote unquote dead weight that's dragging you down. Especially emotionally. I mean, the amount of stuff that flows around in our heads at any given moment is wild. Um, so you have to kind of pick and choose, those battles um, on what you want floating through. Because if it's a negative situation, you don't want that because that ruins your day. That puts you in a kind of a bad mood, and besides being in that bad mood, it's more along the lines of stoking the fire is where one little thing drops the gas can and explosion. You don't want to be like that. There's no way to live. Um, you want to be able to walk around with a clear mind, or as clear as we can be. So, I want to kind of how I want to end this, episode here is forgiveness doesn't change the past. It changes the relationship with the past, and it changes your future. And what that means is every single thing that we've gone through shapes us in one way or another. If it's a positive thing or more a negative thing, it shapes how you were and how you are. So getting rid of all of that negativity, you know, it it really does weigh you down. Um, and that's why you have to think positively. You have to, focus on the positive things in a tough situation. Not when it's easy, when it's hard. And that's, that's a small bit of advice for you. Um, obviously with a question that I, always tend to ask, for you guys to leave comments of is, who do you most need to forgive? Someone else or yourself? Leave a comment. Let me know. Love to talk to you guys about it. Um, we have a next episode coming up next week, episode 15. And it's going to be focusing on love, how to give it, how to receive it, and redefine it. So, once again, I appreciate all you guys for tuning in, checking out the videos, leaving comments. Love to hear what you guys have to say. I mean, this has been fun. This has been therapeutic for me to, come on here and tell you my story. Why? As I've said before, is, I want you to know that you're not alone. You know, Somebody else, myself, or, has gone through stuff. And, if you ever need to reach out, by all means, leave a comment and we'll get to talking, because you do matter and the world's a better place with you in it. Till next time.